And we cannot think of anyone better to kick off our conversation that we're going to be having all year long than Mrs. Tawakkol Karman, who has so graciously agreed to kick off this series for us. I'm going to keep my introduction to her very short because I think you all know who she is and why she's so important. But I will just very briefly note that Tawakkol Karman was born in Mekhlaf and grew up near Taiz in Yemen. She worked as a journalist for a number of years. She earned a degree in political science from Sana'a University. She was involved in demonstrations and actions that were critical of the Yemeni government, which eventually led to her arrest and multiple murder threats on many occasions. She's promoted the struggle for democracy and human rights in Yemen, as well as at the international level at institutions including the United Nations. In 2005, she co-founded a group called Women Journalists Without Chains in order to promote freedom of expression and democratic rights in Yemen. And then from 2007 to 2010, she regularly led demonstrations and sit-ins in Tahrir Square in Sana'a, and actively participated in the 2011 protests and revolutions that took place not just in Yemen, but against ruling regimes in a number of Arab countries. And then in 2011, she was recognized with the Nobel Peace Prize, along with two other women, one of whom was here a few days ago, apparently, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia. She became the first Arab woman to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. She became the youngest person at that time to have received the Nobel Peace Prize at the age of 32, as she was then, and the second Muslim woman in history to receive the Nobel Peace Prize after Shireen Ebadi. She's been a pioneer every step of the way. We enjoyed listening to her over lunch today with a few students, and we are looking forward very much to her keynote. We're looking forward to this entire year of events. And without any further ado, I would invite you to please join me in giving a very, very warm welcome and showing our gratitude and appreciation for Tawakkol Karman. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, I will try to speak with this mask to breathe. How are you? I'm so happy to be with you here, my fellow sisters and brothers here in Pennsylvania University. I'm so happy to discuss with you a very important issue, which is change. Change is the secret word as for the Arab region and the Middle East, to the extent that it summarized the course of the Arab Spring revolutions. It reflects urgent and necessary needs of our societies after decades of tyranny, failure, accumulated disappointment, and setback in development, economy, politics, education, and all walks of life in our countries. We were highly motivated and all set to get rid of chronic tyranny hindering the rule of law, development, education, and life as a whole, without breaking the cycle of tyrannical and sectarian elites monopoly on politics and power. The issue of change will remain stalled. Nothing has been achieved after 40 years of tyranny. They have failed developmentally and economically. And the current situation of women and human rights is worse than any time since our country's independence from colonialism. Many have long had extensive discussions and debates on the gradual change as the best choice. Nevertheless, our fact-based experience refutes such allegation. Indeed, the monopoly of power and the state being subordinated to the will of dictatorship, be it an individual, a family, a political elite, or a sect, turn any talk of the gradual change into an illusion and a means to embellish tyranny at the expense of rights, freedoms, and the society as well. Today, we remember how economic reform agendas in the early 90s were employed to open the door to widespread corruption and prevented the state from its duties. Moreover, the then so-called emergence democracies were actually mere tyrannical regimes under the cloak of democracy, while in fact they continued to monopolize the state, power, and wealth, and empower corrupt elites and sectarian groups here and there. Various consequences of tyranny have accumulated and erupted into terrorist groups, economic and development failure, widespread poverty and unemployment, and poor conditions in various spheres of life across Arab countries. There will be no way for social change. There will be no way for social change as long as political tyranny sees in backwardness a guarantee of its survival. We add nothing new when we point out to the support of the Arab region's tyrannical regimes for the spread of religious extremism and its groups, in cooperation with major powers that use these deadly tactics in their abroad geopolitical conflict as a means of advancing their interests. Since the mid-19th century, religious fatwas disrespecting women and their rights have been issued by tyrannical monarchies. Those tyrannical monarchies, unfortunately, backed, protected, and safeguarded by the West, by the government of the West. Over the four decades leading up to 2011, there was a buildup of tyranny, its deep structures, its hostility to change, and its restriction on rights and freedom. The regimes exploited resources and wealth of society to build repressive and empower corrupt elites and crushed every attempt toward social mobility and change. Some quick calculations reinforce this fact. Our countries have become poorer despite their considerable wealth. The failure has expanded to already poor education and collapsed economy, and the situation of women has worsened under all forms of oppression against different groups of society. The approach to women's issue from the end of Cold War to 2010 or 2011 under the title of affirmative action and women's empowerment did not improve the status of women in our society. The majority of women continue to suffer from tyranny, poverty, social oppression, and discrimination. I have always believed that a better situation for women needs to integrate their liberation and rights into issues of society as a whole. Only when the change process is achieved and the state is established for all its citizens, women will have their proper place. Women will have their rights. At the moment, women as part of society liberated from tyranny will have better chances of realizing their rights. When political forces in power are driven by the faith that women are equal to men in rights and duties, and no one has the right to disrespect them, nor their rights, then the issue of women has been put all at once on the path of salvation from the injustice and discrimination. All this requires women's equity and equality to be part of the culture and vision of change forces. Otherwise, empowerment will be only exceptional measures that promote the discrimination as an approach. If the state and the forces in power in any country believe in equality and reject anti-women discrimination, women will not need positive discrimination that grant them some rights. If the culture of the ruling forces is based on discrimination against women and on inequality between men and women, which is further fostered in educational curricula, schools, and mosques, then there will be no way to change the public attitude towards women except with a political change against the ruling forces and their backward discriminatory culture. Empowerment was often superficial and exploited by the regimes hostile to women and their rights. Empowerment can only be an effective tool of change for the benefit of women if a solution to power and tyranny is developed. I am talking here about societies and countries where this problem has not yet been addressed, and their dictatorships, either flagrantly or under the guise of democracy, adopt policies hostile to women and society as a whole, and do not recognize the people's right to rule itself through a free and fair democracy. This is how the status of women in our societies looks like. The human rights situation in general is still at its worst and has grown even worse due to the retaliatory wars against our peaceful revolutions and societies. Wars come to take revenge on peoples who raised their voices in order to decide their fate and choose who would rule them. Dear brothers and sisters, every time I try to reflect on our experience during the past decades, I find myself returning to the essence of the change process represented by the Arab Spring and how it served as a test to international positions on all issues of freedom, human rights, democracy, and the desired transformation towards civil society and the modern state. All the slogan chanted by the world regarding support for democracy and the right of people to self-determination and choose their rulers evaporated due to its position on the Arab Spring revolutions. We face a look-like world war that continues to this day. Have we broken the laws of the universe when we raised our voices for change? When we raised our voices for freedom, democracy, dignity, autocratic regimes had failed and rotted. Unemployment, poverty, oppression, crackdowns, corruption, all of this was the reality of the Arab regimes before our popular uprising in 2011. Terrorism was a product of tyranny, whether through the recruitment of extremist groups by the regimes or due to the economic and political failure and bringing societies to a dead end. Millions of Arab youth found themselves stripped of their ambitions and life chances. We did not make revolutions out of nowhere. We did not make revolutions out of nowhere. In fact, the Arab revolutions should have broken out earlier, and their outbreak was our historical opportunity to catch up with the times. But the global order stood in the side of the counter-revolutions, led regionally by Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Iran. They bombed money and weapons and recruited and supported the militias to confront our aspiration for democratic countries where citizenship and law prevail. We neither attacked them nor declared war on them. Yet Saudi, UAE, and Iran saw in our freedom a threat to them, and in change as an attack on them. Saudi Arabia and Iran compete with each other about whom of them will reap the benefit of counter-revolutionary wars against our people. However, have the same goals, hostile to our aspiration for change, democracy, human rights, and freedom. Dear sisters and brothers, before I talk about my country, Yemen, it's very important to talk about Afghanistan. According to the statement of President Biden and US officials, America has achieved its goals of war. Al-Qaeda has been eliminated and its leader, Osama bin Laden, has been killed. I don't think the United States was interested in women's rights or in building respectable democratic model. Of course, there are local prerequisites for doing this, but America didn't perform its duty in this context as it should. So the talk about Western abandonment of women in Afghanistan seem less than what happened. The same thing in the Middle East. Afghanistan was abandoned when no real efforts were made to help Afghans build a state that accommodates everyone and can defend its citizens. America has taken care of the crusts, and the crust would not have lasted long. The US concern about women in Afghanistan was superficial and meaningless without guaranteeing women's rights within a real state. It is meaningless. Reflecting on what happened over the past decades, it can be said that the United States does not have a consistent policy on issues such as human rights, women's rights, and democracy. Your observation is accurate about not showing any interest in women's rights or human rights in Saudi Arabia, for example, compared to Afghanistan. This issue is very simple because Saudi Arabia has oil and is an important customer for American weapons, while Afghanistan is a poor country and there is no oil. America went to Afghanistan under the pretext of fighting terrorism and made promises that a new Afghanistan would be without the Taliban. The meaning of the promises was that the fighting terrorism, the meaning of these promises means civil, democratic, stable economically and politically regime would succeed the Taliban. This is the true comprehensive meaning of the fight against terrorism, as it is supposed, in such a way that it may be justified and give a little moral and humanitarian cover, as the fight against terrorism is not only security-wise. Bombing by planes and intense shooting, rather it is a comprehensive process besides being security and military. It is building an alternative democratic system Otherwise, victory will be ultimately be for the extremism and terrorism. 20 years of the invasion of Afghanistan, the Taliban came back stronger than it was and took over the rule of Afghanistan again. And we heard Biden say, we didn't go to Afghanistan to build a state, but to fight terrorism. The result is very disappointing. America, unfortunately, has made the Taliban a source of inspiration for change. People say today that the West responds only to those who shoot bullets, and that all it talks about supporting democracies and peaceful civil movement is just empty promises. These are, unfortunately, the worst lessons and false message ever. All of this, these are empty promises that lack evidence. Caring for women is action and not just word. Protecting women, defending on women's rights is actions and not just words. Actions that means that US should be busy building the institutions of a democratic, economically and politically stable state for these countries in which they interfere. What were they doing in Afghanistan during 20 years? Nothing but chaos. Finally, it's very important to talk about Yemen, my own country, which is part of this world. My country, Yemen, is facing terrible tragedies due to fascist war. After 6 years of war, Yemen remains the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, standing alone and without any real support. The United Nations and the major powers have failed to help Yemen stop the war and restore its state. And the world has done nothing to stop genocide against Yemenis. The major powers turned a blind eye to Iran and its support for the Houthi militia, while at the same time, siding with their interests with Saudi Arabia and the UAE at the expense of Yemen. Turning a blind eye to the crimes and violations of the regional parties in Yemen is nothing but betrayal and tacit support for warlords at home and for Iran, Riyadh, and Abu Dhabi responsible for bloodshed in Yemen. The failure and inability of the international community to activate its collective mechanisms to stop war and economic collapse and help Yemenis restore their national state have contributed to the continuation of war and chaos and the growing humanitarian crisis. For 7 years, our people in Yemen has been facing an all-out war of revenge, a fierce war that represents a new battle of undermining the life foundations of the entire population. The state collapsed and sectarian militias overrun, which is Houthi, overrun and occupied the capital and cities. In light of the non-payment of salaries and the collapse of the health and service system, the Houthi militia have taken control of international aid. These militia have tampered with the content of curricula in area under their control by imposing extremism, sectarian content, prohibited singing, took arbitrary measures against women, and imposed a puritanical vision that abuses women, not unlike what the Taliban has done in Afghanistan. For their part, Saudi Arabia and UAE have bombed our cities and infrastructure, established militia loyal to them in the city of Aden, prevented the legitimate government from operating from within the country, and taken control of key ports, oil, gas, facilities, and strategic islands like Socotra and Miyun. Millions of Yemenis are at risk of starvation, suffering from poor living conditions, war, chaos, non-payment of salaries and wages, total absence of basic public services, and rapidly deteriorating local currency. Here, we call on the world to stop this brutal war against Yemeni people. We call on the world to support Yemeni people to restore their state and complete the transitional period accordance with the three references represented by UN Security Council resolution on Yemen, the agreement on transfer of the power, and the outcomes of the national dialogue. We call on the world to impose restriction on warlords and militias leaders and not to deal with them as political parties. We call upon the world to respect the rights of our people to life and put an end to a fascist war whose main parties are Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. And finally, I want to assure you that with all this chaos, with all this war, with all these ugly faces of counter-revolution, people in Yemen and people in Arab Spring still desire for democracy, for change, for real change that guarantee all kinds of freedoms, equality, democracy, and rule of law. And they 100% believe on their destiny with the prevailing, with the victory. So let me to tell you that our belief in our right to a life in which human rights, freedom, and dignity are preserved will not fade away, and its flame will never dim as long as we have a breath of life. Big greetings to all those people who sacrifice for their freedom, democracy, and rule of law in Arab country and all around the world. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Agreed to take questions from the audience. We'll have a microphone floating around. We would ask you, as always, to keep your questions to the point and phrased in the form of a question.
Is there any questions? Unfortunately, this is absolutely not right. Unfortunately, we discover finally that West doesn't want democracy to be in the Middle East. This is the opposite that is happening because their alliance with the counter-revolution leaders and because of their absence and because of they let down the people in Arab Spring countries. People died just trying and calling for justice, for freedom, for democracy. If the West really decided to be with them, that not, will be the fate that you see now. And you will see those leaders of counter-revolution or those dictators to be in the prison of the International Criminal Court. But unfortunately, until now, they make a very bad policy, and they are practicing mistaken policy against the will of people for democracy and freedom.
Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions?
Thank you very much for coming. I just want to reiterate that this has been amazing. I was just wondering what you think of the notion of changing the system from the inside.
Yeah, this is a very important question. And this is what we exactly doing. Change should be something from inside. The people themselves should call, should desire, should sacrifice for their democracy and should do everything for making change, for making their country, for making the world better. So when we call why the West didn't respond to the will of people, that doesn't mean that why didn't they interfere physically on the on helping people. No, that means why didn't them let them alone? Why didn't them support? Why did they support the dictators? Why did they agree to the coup that happened in Egypt, for example? Why did they sell weapons to Saudi and Emirates to kill Yemeni people? Why are they silent of the crimes that happened from Iran and so on? So it's very important. So leave the people. Don't accept conspiracy against them. Don't welcome their dictators. Even if you welcome the dictators in your country and host them as a leader while they are killer, this is the one kind of betraying your value as a Western government that claim that they are protecting freedom and they are supporting freedom and democracy. And also, it's kind of supporting indirectly those dictators. So it doesn't say that come to us and help us with your tunnels, with your bombs, with your missiles. No, leave us with our destiny without encouraging those dictators, to kill. And don't make alliance with them. Don't make alliance with them. So really what happened in Egypt, for example, the military coup that happened in Egypt, either it's with the bliss of some Western government or silence of them. The same thing now, it is what happened in Tunis, the kind of coup of Qais bin Said. Okay, where is the West? Where is their voices? Where is their real pressure? Where is the United Nations? United Nations itself came to protect the rights of people. Where are they? Now, what is happening now is undermining the final castle of democracy in Arab region after Arab Spring. So where are they? So fearing from people. Unfortunately, I'm saying like while I was before, I said no, Western government, they are so good and they are supporting democracy, but in reality, after 10 years of Arab Spring, we think that the real betrayal came from the Western government. Those dictators, Saudi, Iran, and UAE, they are protecting their interests. They are cruel, they are dictators. People will revolt against them. So we can't say that they are betrayed, they are the one that we against them. So, but the big picture is why the Western governments support them. Why are they silent until now against the Bashar al-Assad crimes? If Western government was serious against Bashar al-Assad, he wouldn't be in his chair until now, killing millions of Syrian people and displaced them from their houses. So this is their responsibility. This is the responsibility of humanity. It is not just it's come from inside. This is their responsibility to stop their dictators from killing the people.
Jesse, and then we'll go to Haroon over there. We also have some questions. It's a hybrid event, and we have some questions online as well. Is that right? Yeah, okay.
Firstly, thank you for being here and just for everything that you're doing for women. I think it inspires every woman around the world. You're known as the mother of revolution. So this might be a bit of a personal question, but how do you think mothers can have a voice in democracy, especially because I personally think that women who are mothers in this generation, who have been from a generation which has always been misrepresented in democracy. So in your opinion, how can mothers have a voice in a democracy?
In Europe, how can women be a model in supporting democracy? Do you mean that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to say, how can mothers who are mothers have a
Mothers.
voice in a democracy?
Helping
Mothers.
Helping me as a mother?
Yeah, how can mothers have a
Yeah,
voice?
just
in-
in
Ah.
general, mothers,
Women who are
yeah,
mothers.
all around the world.
Okay. How can mothers supporting democracy?
Yeah.
Okay. Women as a mother or as a single, as a young woman, all women around the world can do a lot. And I also mothers can do more than anyone. I am mother of 4, by the way. For me, I think it's my responsibility to say to everyone in my country as my child. So don't make motherhood to prevent you from having, the sense human being. Okay, I am mother, so I just will focus on my duty at home, which is very, very important, and you should be successful in this rule. But also fathers also has their rule also. How can mothers and fathers do their work and do their responsible inside house and outside house? To be partner with your support and to also to educate your kids how to be responsible. To be also responsible. Always they said, don't you afraid about your kids while also they are under. I am thinking the future. And even if there is a big sacrifice, it will be for the second generation, for the third generation. I don't want to be selfish just for my kids, for everyone on the planet, not just in my, in my home or in my country. So mothers is the most inspiration rule to do the best for your society. And it should be also the fathers, the fatherhood should be the same thing.
Harun over there, the front row. And then we'll go to the lady in the back. And then I see a couple more hands. Okay. All right. Matt? Okay.
Hi, it's been a real pleasure listening to you tonight. And I have a question about, about your talk. And, in the region, many countries, on the one hand, lack things like, reliable access to like water, food, hygiene products, education, healthcare, things of that sort, right? And on the other hand, there is also an absence of democracy. And I'm wondering, what the relationship between these two are, whether, having one would lead to having the other and how that would work out. Thank you.
Look, there is no peace without development, and there is no development without democracy. So it's very important to don't divide between the right of people to access to their services with the right of people to have democracy. And it is the rule of every ruler, of every government, to provide the development and security and democracy and stability at the same time. So you can say that no, we will focus on one thing and we will ignore everything. And to make people to choose between dictatorship and development, that is the biggest mistake that anyone commits, especially the international community. It's to put people to have a choice between terrorism or democracy or stability. It's also a biggest mistake, because corruption leads to instability. Tyranny leads to instability. Dictatorship leads to terrorism. And the terrorism is a product of tyranny. And peace doesn't only mean, to stop wars, but also to stop injustice, to stop corruption, to stop inequality.
Question back there, lady back there, and then we'll go to some online questions, and then we'll come back into the room. So.
Good evening, and thank you very much. I think on the same topic of women in leadership positions, democracy within itself dictates that women have an equal say. My question is to you from a cultural and social sense, is the Middle East ready to see women in leadership positions?
Thank you for this question, because I just tweet, I think, a very important tweet, and it will make a very big discussion about Qais bin Said, the president of Tunis. As you know, now he made a kind of coup. He stopped the parliament, and now he wants to stop the constitution, and he wants to lead the country alone. And he took all the authority from the government. He stopped also, the prime minister, etc., etc. And today, he appointed, after he took all the power, the legislation authority, the execution, all the authority. How can I say it? The judicial, executive, all the authority. Only now, governor will the woman the rule. Woman to be a decor. Is this the rule that women suffered and struggled? Is this the rule of Tunisian woman who did a great? Tunisian woman was the most important woman in the region who fight and sacrifice and has a lot of gains of women's rights. So at the end, that this kind of dictatorship, he will be a dictator. He's not that dictator like the other, but he is in his way to be a dictator. Point this woman as a decor just to make his face beautiful, and just to shut down the voices of his opponents. Okay, I have a woman as a prime minister. No, not this. This is not the woman rule and the woman battle in Middle East or in anywhere. So women's rights for us means democracy rights. For us means expression rights. For us means division of powers. For us means equality. Women's rights for us doesn't mean to put women in fake seats in parliament or government or any kind of authority. It's a real power. So this is our battle, and this is what happened in Tunis. Is summarize the whole story of the sacrifice of our struggle in Arab Peninsula. And unfortunately, there is no real condemn on what happened by Qais bin Said, and because they are afraid from the alternative. They are afraid from Al-Nahda party, the Islamist group, the moderate Islamist group who did a great work toward, the constitution. Yes, they have mistakes, a lot of mistakes, but they are in the political process. While they support Taliban to take the power in Afghanistan. You think, and this is just, so we have a very big battle, to convince world, what is the real meaning of democracy? What is the real meaning of freedom? It is not fake democracy to put what they want. It is not, democracy to say that woman is there. And, is woman there? Now they will pull up, they will make a big celebration that woman is. in the power in Tunis. No, this woman is weak, and Qais bin Said put her just to tell the world, I am a man who supports women. No, he is the man who collapsed the state, and he is the man who will encourage instability in Tunis and all around, the region.
We'll go to a question from our online audience, our virtual audience, and then we'll come back to our
Can I have the
human
final
audience.
3 questions?
Final 3 questions.
Yeah.
Sure, we'll take one
Yeah.
question virtually, Matt, or yeah, I think we deserve to give them at least one question. And then, although there are a bunch of hands here.
Yeah, a lot of the online listeners are asking about the resolution of the situation in Yemen. Some are asking whether there's any kind of path to a brokered agreement among the various parties. Some are suggesting that breaking Yemen up into multiple self-governing states might be the best solution. And there's one who asks in what way the West can best help bring some fair resolution and democracy to Yemen.
Look, the first important thing in Yemen solution for Yemen is that Saudi and Emirates should leave Yemen now. This is the most important thing. So if Saudi and Emirates stop their war and leave Yemen, Yemenis can solve their problem within themselves. And also, Iran should stop their support to Houthi militia. So this is the most important. Look, Saudi and Emirates, they are the one who supported the division in Yemen. They want Yemen to be divided. Their interests is to make Yemen divided to pieces, not just to pieces. They want Yemen to be ruled under the rule of militias. Because of that, they supported militias in the territory which is liberated from Houthi militia. There is no Houthi militia in the south, and they supported militias there, an extremist militia, to be against the legitimate president, which is in Riyadh. He is in Riyadh. They claim that they support him while they put him in some kind of house arrest. They don't allow him to return to Yemen, and they support this militia in south to call and carry weapons, calling for division. So this is not a view of Yemenis. This is not the demands of Yemenis in south to be divided, to have the division. But if it's a call, a demand of some Yemenis, this is an internal issue. We can solve it without any outside, feeding. And this is what is happening by Saudi and Emirates. So this is, without stopping the war, without Saudi and Emirates should leave the country and should stop their supporting militia in the land, it will not have a solution in Yemen. Because what is happening now? They said that ending the war of Yemen, which is stopping the bombs. No, it is not stopping the bombs. It's more than that. Stopping the bombs is first, and also it should be, followed by, many other, things. Withdraw the weapons from all militias, from Houthi militias and other militias, and creating a new government that represents all Yemeni people. This government organized the constitution, the referendum of constitution that we already wrote it before the coup of Houthi militia. So put the referendum in the constitution in the referendum and organize the election. In all that, while all this, things, all this process, economic should be supported. Humanitarian aid should be continued. Yeah, it's a full package of solution, but start with Saudi and Emirates, so should stop their hegemony, their guardianship in Yemen. They should leave Yemen immediately Also, Iran should be pushed to stop their support to Houthi militia. Then Yemeni will solve their problems together. It's kind of proxy war. It is not Yemeni, really Yemeni, war.
All right, we have time for two more questions. I know there are quite a lot of hands. All right, one here.
A lot of people think that democracy is just a Western agenda. How would you ensure that democracy can be separated from Westernization so that it is its own thing for any country?
I really hope that it is now a Western agenda. But unfortunately, it is not. It is a Western agenda for their countries. For their countries. But outside, no, they don't want it. And I'm talking that from my experience. And this is what I'm witnessing. And I know the power of the Western government. I know the power of the United Nations if the Western government want to do something. Even alone, they can do alone. Even alone. They can, so from the beginning, when the dictator kills his people, why didn't they freeze their assets, for example? Again, why did they accept the coup in Egypt, the military coup in Egypt? Why? Again, why Bashar al-Assad until now he's still, killing the people in Syria? Don't you think that they have a lot of tools to stop him? But unfortunately, now they are weaker than before. Russia is stronger than them because they were afraid from democracy. They were afraid from alternative, which is people can choose their, the rulers. And if any ruler failed in ruling the country, people will choose another one. So encouraging the military coup or be silencing on that, that is, so be sure, that unfortunately, and I'm so sad to say that now the democracy is not the agenda of West. And what happened in Afghanistan when they hand over Afghanistan to Taliban is the biggest evidence. It's the biggest evidence. They can, they had the ability, the opportunity to build a real Afghanistan, a democrat Afghanistan. And the real democratic, even Taliban, if they will take the power through the bullets, through the vote of people, that's good, no problem. But what they did, they hand over Afghanistan to Taliban, and they said, we came, just to fight terrorism. You are creating terrorism everywhere, while you don't support the will of people for freedom and democracy, and while you encouraging people, dictators to kill their people, directly and indirectly, while you selling them weapons. Today, after 2 days, will be the 3rd anniversary of the Jamal Khashoggi's murder. What happened? What the world do for Jamal Khashoggi's murder? For the justice for Jamal? What? This is the worst crime that happened. All the humanity shocked. A journalist killed in the consulate in Istanbul, Saudi in Istanbul, and his body been dismembered and disappeared. So they didn't do anything. They do nothing. Mohammed bin Salman, they received him. And there is no any kind of trial. So can you tell me that is the West now is supporting democracy or human rights? I can tell you no. But will we people lose our belief on democracy and human rights? Of course not. Will we people wait for the West to help us and to support us, and we will just waiting for them? Will we wait for them? Of course no. You see, every time we are sacrificing for this noble value. we will reach to victory in our route for democracy and freedom and justice. Either the West government will be with us or without. And as I always say, they have to choose between the past, which is the dictatorship, or the future, which is the freedom and democracy. And people will absolutely will have their freedom and democracy, no matter how long it will take. For here in America, it takes decades, centuries. In Europe, it takes a lot of chaos, a lot of problems, more than what's happened in our countries. So we are ready to pay the cost. But if they will change their mind, that will be so welcome. Because we are part of this world and we want to work with each other for a new world, free from corruption, free from tyranny, free from injustice, free from hate. And this people like us will create it with government or without government. And again, when we talk about West, we talk about Western government, not people, not media, not educated people, not universities, not students, all of them, they are with the calls of people for democracy and freedom. We need them to raise their voice against the policy of their government when they align with the dictators, when they support them, when they silence in front of crimes against humanity. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.